These are so much fun. You can combine two designs, the eyelashes, add wherever you're heading. Wake Me In is in the bundle, and then you can just use your own font. You can just use the eyelashes, Off Duty and the eyelashes. Add names with your own font to give as a gift, use for slumber parties. So many ways you can use these. A really important thing to remember when you're going to be using the fabric cutting mats with your Cricut or any cutting machine that does fabric is to really get your fabric down nice and secure and nice and flat. If you just go like that, sometimes it will bubble. So you can see how it's rimpling. That's my own word. So you want to make sure that you get it nice and smooth, no wrinkles, and really secure to your mat. Sometimes I will just use my hands. Other times I will use a brayer. That's probably your best use, but I lent it to someone. So I'm just going to get this down with my hands really well before I send it through. That is going to make sure that it cuts where it's supposed to, that the fabric doesn't move, and that it cuts through. You can cut 2 mask shapes from one 12 by 12 mat. Just make sure you choose your material, whether it's cotton, fleece, or any other material, before placing it on your fabric mat and cutting. So when things go well and your mat is nice and clean and you've cut fabric, it should peel up really nicely, beautiful clean cut edges. Depending on the fabric that you're using and the thickness of it, sometimes a little bit will stick, so you get a little bit of fray, but otherwise you get a really perfect cut. So that is best case scenario. But you will notice there is some fuzz left on there, which you do need to take off. So I like to use baby wipes. And a little tip, always store your baby wipes upside down so that the one that you pull out first is going to have the most moisture on it. You know, gravity. If you store it this way, your moisture is going to go down here, so your driest wipes are on top. Great to know if you have a baby or if you use these for crafting. So once it gets enough lint like that on it, I will take it and just rub over it with a baby wipe, and you'll see that it is picking up that lint. And then once it dries again, it's going to be nice and sticky for your next cut. See all that lint coming up? And this one isn't terribly bad, but I want to show you what happened to another one that I let go even a little bit longer. And you definitely notice the lint a lot more when you're using a dark color than when you're using a light color, but it doesn't mean it's not there if you're using a light color. So here's a perfect example. I had been cutting cream space masks on this one, and then I did black, and then near disaster struck. I went to pull it up, and there were sections that didn't cut, which all is not lost. I can just pull it up and then use my scissors to get that shape out. I can still totally use that to make a sleep mask, but this isn't what we want when we're using the Cricut to cut. We don't want to then have to cut it ourselves as well. And that happened just because this one had way too much lint on it. So it definitely needs to be cleaned with a baby wipe as well. Now, another thing I wanted to show you was once I am done with a cut, normally I do my squares a little bit big. So I will just take them, I'll just take the excess, and if there's a big strip like that, I will just make however wide that will go into a strip, because I'm sure I will need fabric strips for another project down the road. And I do the same thing, oops, with the fusible fleece. This is just extra from when I cut this pile of fusible fleece. So I do love using the Cricut Maker to cut out things like this, especially that have so much shape to them. My hand just gets tired cutting, pinning it on, cutting it out, pinning it on, cutting it out. You can get a lot done in a little bit of time as long as you invest in multiple mats to save you time. You can do it all with one, but then you have to be cleaning it, wait for it to dry so that it's sticky again to do your next one. And you also have to wait to load, unload. So if you have at least 2, you're going to get your project done a lot faster, especially if you're mass producing things. So I took the fusible fleece and I ironed it onto the back, all of these cream sides, so that I can just whip up a bunch of sleep masks. And then I'm going to put some sayings on some using heat transfer vinyl. But first, let me show you how you sew this together. So you have your 14-inch piece of elastic, and you're going to just hook it on the either side, on the right side of your fabric. I'm just going to get that right in the center. And then if you want to, you can fold this like this and pin it, or I usually just leave it like that. And then with right sides together, there's not really right side to black. So you're making a sandwich. I'm just going to hold that and I'm going to clip that in there too. So we have the fleece attached to the cream fabric, then the elastic in here, and then this on top. And I'm going to clip all the way around, and you're just going to sew around this with a 1/4 inch seam. And I like to do 2 small ones to remind me to stop, because you want to leave a few inches of this top straight edge open for turning it right side out after you have this sewn together. All right, so we're going to do that, and then you can just set up a few of them and take them to the sewing machine and get sewing all at once. Now I'm going to sew around the sleep mask with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving a few inches on that top straight edge open for turning. And I like to go back and forth a little bit at each end, just to make sure you're not going to pull your stitches out while you're flipping this right side out. And then also where these 2 sides are, where the elastic is, we're going to go over that a few times as well, just to reinforce and so that that doesn't get pulled loose when somebody is using their sleep mask later. This is my least favorite part of sewing anything with curves, but it's really important so that when you turn it and press it, that your finished sleep mask will have a nice curve to it, because the fabric is able to move on the inside. All right, and then if anything looks a little bit thick, you might want to trim that down a little bit just so that there's less bulk when you flip it. And I always do that after I clip the curves, just to make sure it's a little bit easier to clip those curves when you have a little bit more distance between the edge of the fabric and the stitch line. All right, we'll get that mess off of there. All right, now we're going to turn it right side out. And just be gentle so that you don't strain and rip the edges where it's sewn together. And you just kind of rubbing this part along the edge just to help it get that shape correct. All right, so now you're going to take it to the ironing board and you're going to press it, and you're going to press it with your opening folded under so that no one will know where it is. Now the final step in sewing the sleep mask is to top stitch. And since I have basically white on one side and black on the other, I'm going to use a white top thread and a black bottom and stitch from this side, just because it's easier to change my bobbin thread than re-threading the entire top part. And then I'm just going to, I'll start over here, and I'm going to go at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, because we want to make sure we catch that folded under, this part that we folded under that is open. We want to make sure that gets closed when we are doing our top stitching. Now that I sewed together a group of sleep masks, I did black on one side, white on the other. It gives me lots of flexibility for decorating, and also is going to be really good at keeping all the light out while you slumber. So the next thing you need to do, if you so choose, is make them more interesting by using some of the cut file designs that came with this bundle. So first I'm going to do a really simple one that many people are going to want. Go ask your dad. Now I made these pretty big. You could make them smaller so they don't take up quite so much of the face mask if you prefer. I basically put them on top of the template for the shape of the sleep mask, and tried to make it smaller, assuming there was going to, be your seam allowance if you sewed yours together. Or if you purchase them, just make sure you measure and then make this whatever size you want. But I wanted this to have big impact so that any child seeing someone with the sleep mask on would not wake them to ask them a question, but would go ask their father. So I'm just taking the mini heat press on medium. I looked it up on the heat guide for the type of vinyl that I'm using. Press that over, and I'm using a matte vinyl. I really like it. So that just looks great. So now let's try another one that is going to have two colors. Always line it up before you press anything. So line everything up, and you're going to notice this was designed to have the in progress kind of go around the Y. But then the eyelashes aren't quite lined up properly. I thought I did a better job of that when I cut it, but it really doesn't matter, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these eyelashes off. And I also combined two different designs. The Beauty Rest in Progress could just be by itself and centered like that. Or you could also add the eyelashes, but you want to make sure they're in the spot that you want them. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press the pink, the Beauty Rest, and I can just press right on this on this plastic. I don't need to add parchment paper or Teflon, because the plastic that comes with the vinyl is perfectly fine to use with your heat press. This pink's kind of cool. It gets a little bit darker, so I can tell that it is on there nicely and ready to roll. Now I'm going to lay out the black pieces. And you do want to make sure you don't touch your elastic with the heat press, because you do not want to melt it. All right, so now that I have those where I want them, I will cover this with a piece of Teflon sheet, because if the press touches the pink where there's no plastic over it, that would be bad. So you can cover it like this, or hold on, just had another idea. I can take the piece that I just pulled off and use that to protect. Yeah, let's just try that. I've never done that before, but I think that should work. All right, so now I'm just going to do the same thing over the black. And you can use a bigger heat press if you prefer, but for these projects, they're kind of small. This mini is just super easy and fast to heat up. And so there is a two-colored design. A few others. I did the pink on top of the black. Looks very cool. This is another one where I combined the eyelashes with one of the words. You could also combine the eyelashes with kids' names. Great for slumber parties, bachelorette parties, girls' trip, girls' weekend. So many ways to use sleep masks.